Here's a couple of clips of information from Sacha Stone. And like I always say, listen to the message.
Apocalypse, we need to understand the true etymology of the word, which is the falling away of the mask, or the shedding of the mask of the skin of the false light. Of the old paradigm, of the arcane constructs and conceptual frameworks, which were essentially psychocultural, psycho-civilizational masquerading as children of God. So for thousands of years, arguably millions of years, we've been incarnating, dipping in and out of this third density temporal realm, and we're all part of the genesis of it. We're all part of the ancient storylines and narratives that eventuated from the ancient world up till today. In the tribal trust lands and the indigenous wastelands today of the Aboriginal peoples, we have the people wrecked by poverty and by dis-ease and by diabetes and by poverty and wretchedness in many parts of the world. Emphasis North America. Look at the Hopi nation, the Aboriginal peoples in Australasia. I've had this conversation with a number of the hereditary elders and even leaders, which is that they themselves today are the souls of the white imperialists going back hundreds of years, now come back in to become the souls inside of these Native Americans and Native Aboriginal peoples to suffer the end of the cycle that we began. Yeah, and a number of them acknowledge this and recognize this. The more advanced adepts and shamanic people, they recognize this, that this is an interweaving, interbraiding, and interfolding of old waves of souls that began the travesty of history and are now having to suffer the indignity at the end of the cycles that they began. So when you understand that that's actually at the meta level what is happening with cultural cycles and civilizational cycles, why are so many people believing that they're fucking Queen of Sheba or Cleopatra or Alexander the Great reborn? Well, that's because in a sense we are all part of an old soul group that was around at that time, and we fractated out and we've come back in variously, remembering aspects of that ancient epoch, that ancient time, and it's come back in because it's written into our DNA, it's written into our psycho and galactic records. None of that matters. Again, what matters is the here and now, and the degree to which we can actualize and awaken within the dream and then become the new progenitors of manifest destiny. But to answer your question, 2025 was a year of apocalypse, piercing the corporate veil, piercing the veil of the dead, of the Borg, of Washington District of Columbia, of the war machine, of the parent corporation, of the imperial hegemony of 500 years of Saturnian rollout of genocide and death and destructivity that came through the Vatican complex, and going back to the time of the Caesars of Rome and the doomsday in 1066 and the registration of living souls and the tabulation of every square inch of land and the fictionalizing of humanity, of the sons and daughters of God, of the indentureship of the living sons and daughters of God over the last couple of thousand years into a state of death and entropy. So that last year was really those of us who could see through the veil, understood the alchemy that we were required to enact and embody, to manifest. And we did that. And I was very much a part of that process. And it was fucking difficult, but we pulled it off. And then I returned back to Africa and continued to thread the emergence of the micronation in Africa that we're establishing for the new earth, not just in one location, but in multiple locations in Africa. Africa is about to become recognized as the central cornerstone of the next global economy, the emergent economy of the world. So I've built those relationships with the hereditary kings and chiefs and governments. To some extent, we're dealing at a governmental level as well, in order to thread a bridge between the corporate fiction, the corporate governments, and the hereditary legacy leaderships, which is really what's being restored now to the world. So in the next 2 to 3 years, we will see all around the world a restoration of the hereditary leadership taking a preeminence, in a sense, as the fiction of the corporate governments stand down under the weight of their own satanic jurisdiction and nonsense, which is to do with fiat economics and the poisoning of air, water, and soil, the capturing of the human souls through registrations and tabulations. All of that begins to move into a state of dissolution now in 2026. But be sure 2025 was that year of the line in the sand. And on a more personal level, it is the distinction between the living and the dead, in as much as, are you still addicted to drinking alcohol? Are you addicted to pornography? Are you addicted to synthetic molecules? Are you embracing the organic sentient aspect of your status as a living child of God, or are you still indentured into the false light? So that was also the dividing line. Now 2026, we see as we move through the equinox, which is the true seeding of the new year coming up, we will see a vertical upshift occurring, where those meek who inherit the earth are going to, who have done the work in that sense and have already aligned frequency X, which is the heart and above. They've aligned that frequency in themselves to the field of God's creation, and they will find themselves moving into the affirmative upshift of the biological ascension. And those who have not and have chosen to peg themselves into the synthetic, into the entropic, they, alack, will find themselves being pulled into the vortex of the kingdom of the devil, who in that sense has earned its right to take. As the fallen light of Atlantis moves into dissolution, you will see that the kingdom of the devil is able to take the lower frequency sets of the human soul will be departing with it. There are no longer draconian imperial reptiles on the inner earth, or even in the hyperspheres that are controlling proxies on earth through the demonic realms. That's also a thing of the past. So in a sense, it's all good. Everything that we're seeing is good, but we still need to witness, apparently, the collapse of the fallen light of Atlantis, which is to say, the idea of Third World War, the idea of imperial hegemony 2.0, and digitization of the world, and hypersurveillance and Starlink and all. So we're still seeing the treachery of the threat, the existential threat of absolute control of the Borg, but it's not real, because the geometry of light is actually supporting the emergence of the children of God. I'll leave it at that.
Wow.
Greetings, friends. It is Thursday, 29th, and tomorrow is the Lazarus 55th Symposium. That's Friday, January the 30th, and the times are 11:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Central, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and 7:30 p.m. GMT, or if you're anywhere in Europe. So, what have we got lined up? The first open segment, going out as a bonus, is Turning the Spotlight. Again, this is the second time we're doing this piece, and it is my beloved Jane Evershed interviewing me in the second installment of Turning the Spotlight. And given that she's cleverer than I am, she's likely to ask pretty good questions, so let's see where that takes us. The second bonus segment we're doing is going straight into the blessings of liberty and the New Earth metric, and this is with Marsha Ann Willardson and Ethan Lucas, who are leading lights in our pantheon of sovereignty and law experts behind the New Earth Coalition, the New Earth movement. So this is a clear introduction by the New Earth, or introduction to the New Earth metric, examining sovereignty, alignment, and practical participation beyond all legacy systems. So my favorite little strap line, which is hashtag fuck the government, is all in good, and you could have that tattooed on your forehead all you like, but it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny unless you know how to follow that through and have an understanding of jurisdiction and an understanding of grace, how to conduct yourself in life, let alone in front of so-called imposed authorities, which is the third party intervention. aka the Catholic Church, the government, the local technocrat, bureaucrat that stands in your way. And that, of course, is what we're seeking to rid ourselves of at this great turning of the age. So check that out, Blessings of Liberty and the New Earth Metric. Then members only section, so that becomes closed to the public. And the last deception, the collapse of the Abrahamic spell, with my beloved brother Dave Emery, the forensic examination, this piece of inherited belief structures and how they continue to shape power, geopolitics, and collective psychology. And of course, Dave comes at the subject from a kind of galactic perspective, in as much as there is God's law, cosmic law, universal law, galactic law, and then laws that govern our immediate kind of solar system and our planetary sphere. And then law descends through the ethers into the earth and becomes, different forms of law as well, which break up into different cultural persuasions and religious persuasions and so on. And then it all comes back down to the breakfast table and the law that your father imposes on the household, for instance, if you have a father. And so that's, for me, what's interesting about this conversation, is talking about the collapse of the Abrahamic spell. What was the source coding of this Abrahamic, you could even say Adamic Abrahamic mindset of fuckery, which is informed essentially by time and by fear, which is what religion is. So religion emerges as a kind of capture technology of time and of fear, indentureship. Indentureship into what? Well, when you're talking about organized religion, you're talking about indentureship into false light adulation, into worshipping false gods, false idols, and then that becomes government. That emerges and evolves as government, and government becomes the kind of lab rat wage slavery technology that ensures that none shall pass, and if you do, you'll probably be executed at dawn. So how do we deal with the last great deception that befell us, the collapse of the Abrahamic spell? That's what this conversation is about. It's a forensic dive into that piece, so that we can really understand what consciousness in action is and what it takes to emancipate ourselves and transmute and transcend the status quo. The fourth segment on the symposium is the architecture of seeing. This is Inner Journey Outer Space with Sebastian Martin. Now, this was a fantastic exploration of perception, of readiness, and the inner architecture that makes expanded awareness and genuine contact possible. So this is where we get into the kind of esoteric elements of real contact, hyperdimensional, and so on. I won't go into that right now because it's a bit too abstruse, but trust me, this is an incredible conversation. You want to understand the mechanics of remote viewing and of connecting to the hyperdimensional spheres and intelligences that exist beyond this third density temporal realm. This is the man, this is the conversation, Sebastian Martin. Then we go into the last member segment, which is the living aura, a Theoban vision for humanity's future. So again, sounds a bit heady, but this is with the remarkable Samuel Chong. And this is a focused look at psyche-driven health of the human energy field and what the Theoba prophecies or the Theoba teachings suggest about humanity's next stage of development. This man, Samuel Chong, is an incredible academic. His mind is quite remarkable. His backstory is entirely sensational. And what he brings into the planetary conversation right now is very interesting. So the Theoba prophecy is not the first time we've touched on that in the Lazarus Symposium. And again, I'll say to the audience looking in, what the fuck is Sacha talking about? You have to kind of be somewhat plugged into the conversation to get to where this is at. But I'm going to leave it at that because I've got to do a couple more drops and the AC has not been turned on and I am beginning to drip here. So it's Lazarus Symposium. It's the 55th Symposium tomorrow, Friday, January the 30th, and 11:30 a.m. Pacific. 1:30 p.m. Central, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and 7:30 p.m. GMT anywhere in Europe. All right, my friends. Hope to see you tomorrow at the symposium. Bye now.
Well, you heard a lot of truth bombs right there. Take what resonates, what doesn't, just leave. It's okay. If it's not meant for you, it's not meant for you. Use discernment, take it with a grain of salt. But at least now you know. Peace, people.